In this video, I'll be showing you how to glue and clamp your side rail lumber to your board. At this point, you should have all your rail lumber milled to the desired dimensions and a completely flat surface all the way around the sides of your board. I like to flip my board on its side using this multifunction shaping table I designed to let gravity help me a little bit, but this step can easily be done with your board laying flat on your work surface. You're going to be gluing and clamping your milled lumber around the sides of your board one at a time. And like I mentioned during the strip method video, it's always good to do a dry fit test with your clamps before you start gluing. Once you're all set and you've got your gloves on, apply a nice even coat of polyurethane glue on the side rail frame piece. Use a roller, a stir stick, or a squeegee to spread that glue evenly to ensure the glue is covering the plywood side rail piece and the top and bottom strips. Next, take your full-length plank and get it lined up, starting with a clamp in the center to hold it in place. I'm using these 4-foot Bessie clamps that work really well. If you don't have these types of clamps, I'll show you another couple techniques later on. Continue outwards, one clamp at a time, with the goal of closing any gaps between the frame and the milled lumber. On this first side, you can see I'm struggling to get a good clamp near the nose where the rail starts to bend more aggressively because my clamp is meant for perpendicular clamping pressure. The technique that I used on the other side was to cut a couple of small triangular blocks out of scrap wood that I hot glued to opposing sides of the board, which gave me a lot better clamping angle. Another helpful tip is to use temporary screws to clamp down the front and the back couple inches of your rails. You're going to be cutting off those sections and replacing them with your nose and tail blocks, so those screw holes will not be visible at all. If you see any gaps in your board and you run out of clamps, don't worry. I found that the elasticity of duct tape or plastic wrap provides enough clamping pressure to attach your rails to. We try to design our kits for the small workshop builder in mind, and you might not have access to a ton of these long clamps, but that does not need to stop you from building an amazing board. If you're using the plastic wrap, give yourself a good length of it and wrap it around as tightly as possible. And depending on how stretchy your brand of plastic wrap is, you might need a little extra pressure. You can use shims or scrap wood to create a wedge in between the wrap and the board, which increases the tension and closes those last remaining gaps. After that first side's glue has dried, flip your board over and repeat the process of spreading your glue over the entire side rail frame piece and then the top and the bottom strips. Since one of my planks snapped at the joint where I used Titebond glue instead of polyurethane glue, I decided I'd show you on this other side how I attach rail lumber in separate sections versus pre-glued together. The process remains much the same and actually takes some of the pressure off of needing to clamp the full-length piece down in one go. Here's where I use some hot glue to attach those triangular blocks, and you can see how much more effectively the clamp bites down and applies the right direction of pressure. I used the same technique at the pointed nose section and it worked great. One of the coolest things about our community of board building customers is they're excellent problem solvers and sometimes send us new techniques that we didn't come up with ourselves. This alternative spring clamp rail attachment method is so simple and yet so effective that we want to thank Kevin R. from Annapolis for this one. We definitely recommend this method if you're using 2 layers of rail lumber and you don't have the extra long bar clamps. So first you'll need to mill your full length of lumber just a little bit wider so there's about an inch of overhang on both sides. Next, you're going to attach the first or inner layer of rails to the plywood frame using glue and several wood screws down the center line. Once the glue has fully dried, you can remove all of those screws and you're going to have that first layer secured snugly to your board. And then next, you're going to attach the second layer of planks by applying glue to the first and then clamping the 2 layers together using these 99-cent spring clamps, ensuring that there's solid contact to the first layer. Once you've added all of your layers of rail lumber and the glue is dried, you're ready to trim off that excess overhang and move on to the next step. To do this, use your handsaw and leave about a 1/4 inch of extra just so you don't damage your strips or cut into the rails too deep. I finish by using a hand plane to get that extra little bit of material flush with the top and the bottom of my board. It might be tempting, but you don't want to remove too much of your rail lumber quite yet. We'll cover how to sand and shape your rails to the final shape after we've added the nose and tail block in the next video.